going to answer them. Um, that deployment themselves. So it's very important to look at the job description, because in the data scientist world as well, maybe some people say data scientist, but it's actually a data analyst role, for example. Or some people say we are hiring for a machine learning engineer, but the job description actually mentioned like the machine learning engineer is actually doing the data engineer, data scientist, and perhaps data platform engineer's task. So yeah, so don't just look at the job titles, but you also need to look at the job description itself. And this definition over here is just, I think, a commonly understood and agreed upon by a majority of people, that these are the roles and the things that these different titles do. Yeah, so let's talk about a possible kind of collaboration between these different data science roles. So like just now we have a software engineer who builds software, or like a software engineer team who builds software. They took care of the front end, back end, and maybe mobile apps. And then they would have a lot of logs, a lot of data from the users and customers, and perhaps some uploaded pictures and images, or perhaps videos or audio clips from the software themselves. And they'll store them in a database that's, just store the very raw representation of all this data. And we have a data engineer who manages the database, and sometimes it's database admin, or like DBA is, but let's say it's DE for now, because it's a possible kind of collaboration. It's just one of the many different types of collaboration in the different companies. So yeah, so the data engineers would like manage the databases and tables, and ensure that the data pipeline is always available. And data engineers might even take the raw data and then pre-process it pre-process it to a more ML ready form, and then store it in another database or table, and then make sure that the SWE only have access to the DB role, and the other data science roles would have access to the more ML ready database. So we have a data analyst over here. So data analyst would build up dashboards, like query data from the DB role, or perhaps sometimes the DB more ML ready table, and then they'll build dashboards from the data that they have, and find interesting insights from the data by just querying data from the DB, and then run some SQL to find the different relationship, the correlation, perhaps some causation, and then after they understand about the data, and they would know what direction should the business focus on, and they'll actually influence product decisions by perhaps talking to the business and PMs, and then talk to the engineers as well. For example, if they want to track some certain behavior, they might also talk to the software engineers and tell them that, okay, we want to track this certain behavior. Can you add a tracker to it or something? So this is about data analysis. And how about data science? For data scientists, like mentioned before, their job is to train models and improve models' performance. So they'll create data from the DB, which is a more ML ready DB, and they'll train that model. After they train that model, they would they'll save the model, as well as how to set up the model, and then give the model to MLE. MLE is the machine learning engineer. So the machine learning engineer's job is to push the trained model to production. Like, in other words, they try to make an API out of the trained model, and they need to ensure high availability of the trained model. So they have some basic requirements, like how many query per seconds they need to meet, and then how much is the latency. So they have some KPIs that they need to meet. And these two would collaborate together. So sometimes the MLB would see that, oh, the code that the data scientist write isn't that optimized, and they might try to talk to the data scientists, or they would optimize it themselves. And sometimes we also have the DPE, which is the data platform engineer who builds the data science platform. Their main goal is to standardize the DS workflows as well as the MLE workflows. So perhaps data scientists and MLEs would work on this platform, and this platform would just standardize a few connections, and perhaps some they will abstract away some of the details that the data scientists and MLE do not need to know. Basically, DP would maintain the infra or the platform that the data scientists work on. So yeah, so this is just a one kind of collaboration. I think in different companies it may look very different. Because sometimes when the company is very small, perhaps they only have the data scientists, and data scientists have to manage all of this, which is great as well, because you can have an overview of an end-to-end machine learning pipeline, or like the data science pipeline. Yeah, next, let me talk about the career growth, or like the typical career ladder. For entry roles, we usually start with associate X, where X can be data scientist or analyst or machine learning engineer and so on. And after getting promoted, you become X. And then I think in bigger companies, you usually have two tracks, or even in smaller companies as well. You would have a technical track and a manager track. For technical track, you'll be focused more on the technical skills, like you get promoted to a senior X, and then perhaps a higher level, like a staff X, and so on. Perhaps you have senior 1, senior 2, staff 1, staff 2. In It's sort of like the software engineer role, I would guess, like L1, L2, L3, L4. And then for the managerial track, you might become a team lead or a head of department and so on. So I think when getting started, you don't have to be worried about too much about this. You start with the associate role, and then once you get promoted to X, then you can start to think about which track you want to go in the end. But it's not necessarily that you get from X to a manager 1. You might also get from senior X to manager 1, but I think that depends on the company a lot. Yeah. Next, I'll talk about preparing for interviews. These are some of my own experience as well as observations. So just take this as a reference. I might be wrong at some points, but I hope this will be helpful to you. So I'll share about tips on how to research for the job and company you want, and how to pass the technical tests and data science assignments. So before the interview, you should actually prepare a few things. First of all, of course, is to know what's needed, or what is the company and the job description is looking for. So I would advise you to study some job descriptions by the company, or for example, company A have several roles in the data science. They have like data analysts, data scientists, machine learning engineers, and you should study all of them before making a decision. Or if you know that you just want to go for a machine learning role, perhaps you should study the job descriptions of multiple companies and understand what are the general skills that are expected by the role of the company. And then you could go on to websites like Glassdoor and read about the interview experiences. Usually, for bigger companies, they would have a lot of hints, a lot of people sharing their experiences, and they will talk about what are the questions that are being asked during the interview. But and then keep in mind that these are again just a bias sample, because not everyone posts their experience there. So take it as a reference again. And you could just copy down the questions and then put it in a Google Doc or somewhere, and then prepare the answers for them. It can be very technical, or it could be questions about cultural fit and all that. And then next, I would strongly advise you to have a data science portfolio. So this is like my quote. I think that picture says 1,000 words, but portfolio would say 1,000,000 words. By showing the portfolio, I think it's the best way to showcase your skills and what you are capable of. I mean, the portfolios are usually animated. That means that people are more likely to remember, as well as more attracted to it. You usually get people's attention when you are showing your portfolio. It sort of packs you as a very presentable individual or like a very skillful individual to the interviewer, because like interviewer interviews multiple applicants and candidates, and you want them to remember you. And I think portfolio is a very good way to go about this. Of course, have a few stories to tell. You could prepare a few stories and be prepared to talk about the challenging problems that you face and how did you go on to solve them. Those problems, I think, like when you are getting started, the more technical they are, the better. And because the main thing is that when you are getting started, when you are interviewing for an entry role, I think people less likely to care about how you lead a team and all that. They might be more concerned about your technical experience as well as expertise. And it would be great if you could say something like you made a problem that slows down your system or portfolios a lot, and you try to troubleshoot it, and then you found a way, uh, uh, possibly a way that no one has thought of before. Or like when you look through profiling information, and then you see some bottlenecks inside the program, and then you go on to solve it, and the speed increases from X to Y, and the CPU load or GPU load decreases from X to Y. And these are really useful metrics. Try to include some numbers in that. And definitely check out the STAR or STAR framework as a checklist. So STAR stands for situation. So you start with a situation, and then you talk about the T, which is a task that is required, and then you talk about your actions, which is A, and then you talk about the results, which is R. So it's always useful to have some stories to tell, because people would usually ask, what is your most challenging project, and how did you go about to solve it? Of course, have some answers to the typical interview questions, but I'll say focus more on these two questions, which is why company X, and why you. These two things I would advise you to not give a general answer, but to put more thought and to put more time to think about what are the unique characteristics of the company X. Something that company X has, but the other companies don't have. And when talking about why they should choose you, you should also talk about your unique advantages, which other candidates don't have. So not just giving a general answer like I could work well with people, I could learn fast and all that. Give some proofs, preferably your past experiences when doing the portfolio and all that. And of course, read articles online. Some people would share their interview experience, or perhaps some technical challenges that they face, which could help to improve the performance of your portfolio. So personally, I've written a interview experience um, article when I was applying for Shopee Singapore. So this would be the link to the Medium article. Don't worry about it. This we would share the link to these slides at the end of this session, so you could check out this article later. But essentially, I talked about how did I prepare for the interview, how did I prepare for the coding test, and how did I manage all the interviews that I went through, and just some tips and yeah, just sharing my experience about the whole interview process until I land the offer. Okay, now I'll talk about some tips for data science assignments. So this is where, so I actually applied for a lot of companies and they all give out very different data science assignments. So this, I think it's mainly based on my experience as well as my knowledge of talking to people in the same industry. Yeah, so most of the time you receive a data science assignment and they'll give you some days or sometimes even weeks to do it when you apply for a data science role. And some a lot of the times it won't affect your scoring. But don't listen to that. This is because while they are right that the time to submission won't affect the grading, but when the examiner or evaluators compares your submission with the other candidates' submissions, who spends much more time than you do, like 3 times or 4 times more time than you do on the assignment, you are very likely to lose out. So um, try to maximize your free time as much as possible to focus on the. So this is what you should do instead. You should spend as much time as possible and submit as close as possible to deadline. But I mean not like minutes before. But at least you should submit on the day of the deadline itself. And during the data science assignment, it's very important, extremely important to be detail oriented and be very careful when drawing conclusions and insights because you need to back everything up, everything that you said, every insight or conclusion you say with some statistical tests and data. So you know that the thing that you said is actually backed up by perhaps a very wide confidence interval, like you are 95% sure that what you say is true and something like that. You should also look at high value business problems first. Um, you should stand, you should wear the shoes of the CEO perhaps and identify the high value problems and the high value uh, insights that you want to know, and then focus on them first. You should not get too technical before you even identify what matters to the business. And yeah, I think these tips are very important for a data science assignment. And I'll go on to talk about tips for coding tests. And coding test is usually a test for software engineers and programmers and coders and people who build softwares. But since data science roles, like data scientists, they would use Python, and for data analysts, they would use SQL. It's very important to have the SQL and coding, SQL and Python skills as well. Sometimes they would also ask for lower level languages like Golang or even Java or C++. That would depend a lot on the company. But usually I would say I would advise to have a strong sense in Python and SQL for the data science and data analytics roles. Yeah, sometimes you get a coding test too in addition to the data science assignment. I think the first tip I have is you should know like what platform will you be tested on. Is it a HackerRank? Is it Codility? Is it Glider? Is it just on Google Doc? can you use Jupyter Notebook? Can you use your own IDE and so on? Because you don't want to waste time figuring out how to run your program or how to debug your program, or waste time finding documentation on the platform itself. So you might want to watch YouTube to get familiar with the platform. You must know where to get documentation on the platform itself, and also how to input the test cases that you want to run for your program. And you should know how to run your code and where to run your code. Yeah, you should also practice lead code a lot, because I think so far lead code is the most recognized platform for people to prepare for coding tests. And there are easy problems, medium problem, hard problems, as well as extra hard problems. Once you look at the Glassdoor, you know that what kind of interview questions are being asked. And some people will say, just prepare lead code easy and medium, or lead code medium and hard, something like that. That you can focus on just these questions. And if it's a face-to-face coding interview, communication is key. Here's why. You need to tell the interviewer what you are thinking before you code. Because while getting the right solution is important, they're also evaluating on how you solve the problem. Because you can get lucky to get the right solution, but if they know how you solve the problem, then it's more reproducible. They are more confident that, okay, so here's how you approach a problem, and how you solve a problem, and this is very likely the method you use every time when you met a when you get a very hard problem. So it's very important to communicate what you're thinking. Like when you get the question, you should the first question you should ask is actually to confirm a few of your assumptions, like would this have negative values? What is the range for this variable x, and so on. And you could also ask, like, can I assume that this is a positive integer with a range of perhaps 1 to 10, something like that. And this also have another advantage, because if they notice that you are thinking towards the wrong direction, they will try to hint you as well. Usually, like most of the coding interviews that I went to, people are usually very helpful, and they'll try to help you as much as possible. Of course, you should know how to calculate the complexity of your code, and this is also a very common question that the interviewer would ask after you have complete writing your code. And I think the final tip is to brute force first and optimize later. You should always give out a workable solution first. Don't focus too much on the don't focus too much on getting it fast before you get it right. This is also good for an interview, because you can show that you actually know how to calculate the complexity of your code. Because when you brute force, you should actually have a something in mind, like this algorithm is actually maybe factorial speed, and you tell the interviewer, so like the algorithm I write is actually a brute force algorithm. It will take a combinatorial complexity to get it run, and let me code that out first. And then once you've done coding, you say, okay, I actually have a few optimizations that I can do to this algorithm to make it faster. Yeah, so I think this should be the flow of a coding test. You should start with a very brute force algorithm, and then you talk your way through optimizing it. Yeah. Finally, here are some recommended courses that I have. So these courses, most of it maybe not most of it, but maybe half of it I've taken, and I find it really good. If you are into analytics role, this is definitely good course for you. It talks about so this course is by Google, and it talks about like A/B testing and all that. Um, it starts with basically it has all the very fundamental knowledge that you need to have when you are getting into data analytics. And this is actually free on Udacity. Definitely check that out if you are into trying to apply for a data analyst role. And next is machine learning course by Andrew Ng. I think this is given a very well-known course by Andrew Ng. It's on Coursera. And then we also have deep learning course by Andrew Ng on Coursera as well. I think you could start with a machine learning course, and then once you're done, you could go on with the deep learning course. And then if you are into the machine learning engineer, or you want to be closer to the infra or platform side, you could check out this Code Cloud guide. I think this has very good tutorials and hands-on tests. What I like about Code Cloud is that they have a lab test simulation scenario. So you actually type in the command, they simulate some scenarios for you to troubleshoot and fix. So I think it's a very hands-on course. It's not just a lecture from start to end. It has some quizzes mixed in with some hands-on labs that you could take. So if you want to learn about Kubernetes, Docker, DevOps for machine learning, actually not just for machine learning but for software as well, I highly recommend this Code Cloud. Actually, these are just 4 resources that I have, but if you want to find good resource, here's a great tip from me. Right, you could just Google Reddit, and then the thing that you want to learn, and then a space course. Then you would get a Reddit page where people are discussing about which courses they took and what do they think about the courses. And here are some useful links. So again, this is my interview experience at Shopee. This is the link to the article. Oh yeah, and another thing is I think for CS students or people who want to get into tech, this is a very good page. This is actually by MIT. They share this thing out. I think I got having the session till now. Here's some summary and Q&A. So we'll move on to the Q&A later, but here's some summary. So I've talked about roles in the data industry, the DA, DE, DS, MLE, DPE, the differences between them, an example of collaboration. Usually, what is the career path like? There are 2 tracks, managerial as well as the technical track. And then how to prepare for interview. Before interview, what should you do? And tips for data science assignment, and tips for coding tests. And this too is actually tips for data science related roles. I might use the word data science and data analytics or MLE interchangeably, but in this part, they all mean the same. Like, they are useful for these 5 roles. Then for recommended, I've shared about some of the great courses for I'm also writing a newsletter for CS students. You can subscribe if you want, it's free. And finally, this is actually a feedback from DACN. I would love to hear what you think about this entire webinar. I also like to improve on what can I do better. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all from me now. Uh,
because these things are actually like the most, I would say, those are the knowledge or the tips that the students are actually yearning for before when they try to actually step into this industry. Because right now we're just learning a bunch of theories, but these are actually all the practical stuff, the real deal, looking for in the data scientist. So thanks a lot, Desmond, for as you can see right here. Yeah, it's there. So yeah, feel free to just download the slides for future reference and fill up the feedback form so that we can know on what we can improve to maybe present it better for you, to tailor it for your experience. Okay, moving on to the Q&A session. We have a question, or we have a series of questions from Mr. Shariman Sharul. So do you mind to
mhm.
show the question? So okay, actually this question, it's split into two parts, but I guess you can just like answer everything at once, or either split like it's uh solely on you lah. What technical aspects should I ask in my data science interview, such as what machine learning platform do you use? For example, Azure or PySpark, or data visualization, such as Power BI and Tableau.
Right. Let me have a look at the question. What type of aspects? I think that depends on a lot of the role that you're applying for. For machine learning platform, I think it's likely that you are applying for a MLE role. You should ask about what is the technical stack the company is using, and perhaps the cloud platform, or um, is it the cloud platform that the company is on? Is it on GCP? Is it on AWS? Is it on Azure? Or if they are using some on-prem servers to run their training. I think PySpark is quite famous in the data science and machine learning um, job roles. You could ask about that as well. Yeah. And for data visualization, I think this is more to the
For answering the question. Now moving on to the second part of the questions that Mr. Sharman has. So he said that lastly, what are the unique aspects do we want to share in our data science interview? Or which is more important, business acumen or technical?
so it's sort of like things that only you have, and usually other candidates don't have. And you should also talk about why this matter, and for which is more important, business or technical. I think For entry roles, you should focus more on the technical skills, but you should also share that you have some business sense, because I think in the end of the day, business sense is extremely important. But for entry roles, you should actually focus more on the technical side. But for like more senior or managerial or team lead roles, you should share your experience on driving the data science team to meet business needs. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you again for answering. So I hope that Mr. Desmond has answered your questions, Mr. Shariman. So moving on to the next question. Okay, so for this question, I'm just going to answer it now. Like I'm going to answer it on behalf of Desmond. Like Lim Swing has asked, will the slides resources be made available to us after live? As you can see that we already provided the links to the resources asked by Jia Yu. Okay, so Jia Yu asks, may I know any suggestions for fresh grads?
Right. Yeah, I think this question is a good question because like a lot of people want to internships to skill up themselves. So I think that's a thing that I don't see as much in Malaysia. I think people usually just have one internship. Actually, for me myself as well, I just have one internship experience. But if I could, turn back in time, go back to my university, I think I'll at least try to get two internships in my university on very different roles. Yeah. So go to internships and then like build your own portfolio on your try to make up as experience for you to get a job. Yeah.
Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Jai. And yeah, thanks again, Desmond. So moving on to the next question by Zixuan. Do I need to be very technically strong if I want to go towards the managerial track?
I think it's not 100% necessary, but it's sort of like you need to be uh, knowing.
Okay, so I hope that's a satisfactory answer, and that's a good answer. We have a question from Chai Yao Yang. Any tips and suggestions for mastering DevOps skills?
For me, I think to start, definitely take the Code Cloud courses by Moonshot Manambeth. Those are really fundamental skills, and it's very complete as well. Because some of their courses actually prepare you to get a CKA, or like Certified Kubernetes Admin, or CKAD, Certified Kubernetes Application Developer certificates. So I think these are very good starts. And then go on. So I usually recommend people to solve your own problem. There are a few reasons to this. So one of it is that you get to solve your own problem. And the second one is that it's a valid problem that you have. And the third one is that when you share it with people, you are very likely to find it's not just you having the problem. And then once you get to have more than one user, you can actually put that as an achievement in a portfolio. Say something like, I start by solving my own problem, and then I share it with friends, and they also have the same problem. And now it's actually running with um, a few users checking on this portfolio. It sort of make the portfolio alive in a sense.
All right. So yeah, that's a really good point. Like having it your own flavor makes it really unique, and yeah, and it should be outstanding. Next, we have a question from Mohammed Tayfor. Most job descriptions online say that the minimum requirement with regards to education is a master's degree at the very least. How important is a postgraduate degree, for example, master's or PhD, in order to get a job in this field?
Right. This is a very valid question, actually. Yes, a lot of companies do want a lot of job posting I see wants a minimum master's and prefer a PhD. Um, I think it's just a wish list at the end of the day. If you could prove yourself in some other ways, like if you have 8 years of experience in working in DS, or if you have published job where you find insights about data, and you get to direct yourself instead of doing what's being told by the others. So a lot of the times, even the business stakeholders do not know what matters to them, and it's actually your job to tell them about it. So it's a very open-ended question. To learn about their feedbacks and how can we improve our products to serve them better. It's sort of like a small startup inside a big company. Yeah. So we kind of do a lot of things and cover quite a wide range of things, which I personally really like.
All right, that's very interesting. So yeah, and the next question would be from Andy Chong Hao Yip. Can you share your journey in this field so far? How did you end at where you are today?
Right. So I think it all started when I was in my second year. I know a senior whose name is Kamwo, and then he's like working with Dr. Chan on some AI research projects. And then um, during university, I always want to do something else than just studying. And then I go on to meet Dr. Chan as well. And then Dr. Chan know this company, Moneyline, and then like recommended me to work there with a friend, Ding Sheng. And then we both sign on a contract where we would work for 6 months part-time at Money Lion as a researcher, and then another 6 months as internship. And then after the internship, I continued part-time working with them until a senior in NUS shared with me a vacancy on a research assistant role. But then I try to, because I've always wanted to come to Singapore and like meet a lot of people. So I tried to sign on it, and then I got the offer, and I was in NUS. So when I was in NUS, I was actually considering if I should take a master's or just go for the industry, like the very thing that Tafer had shared before. But yeah, I wasn't sure if I should actually get a master's, but I made up the decision to go to Shopee when I got the offer. And yeah, I might still go back to a postgraduate degree at some time, perhaps. I'm not sure yet. But so far, now, yeah, that's how I got into Shopee today.
Right. So next we have a question from Mohammed Hazik. Does work-life balance exist in data science career path?
Mm, to be honest, so I'll look at this problem in this way. So for I'll compare. I would usually compare data science with software engineering roles. For software engineering roles, it's often easier to predict how much time you need to complete a task. That's just my opinion. It's not entirely true, but I think it's often easier to compare how much time you need to complete a task in a SWE role as compared to a data science role, because data science role is pretty explanatory and sorry, not explanatory, I mean exploratory. Um, Sometimes you can get the model performance up by within a very short time after you change just a single parameter. And sometimes it will take much longer time. You might even need to look at the low-level mathematical proof sometimes to optimize it from there. So work-life balance, I think sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on the phases of the project and which kind of bottleneck you're stuck on.
All right. So we move on to the next question by Ms. Katur Rahman. Apart from programming skills, how much DS, which I believe would be data structure dash algorithm
Oh.
skills, requires in the long run? He said that he would hate to hear a yes.
When you are getting started, maybe it's not that important, but in the long run, if you want to optimize your machine learning algorithm, or like if you want to optimize something, it's like you have a bicycle. You don't know how it works, and you can ride it. It will ride just fine. But if you want to make a bicycle faster, you start to look at the gears, start to look at the lubricant oil that you are using, start to look at the entire weight of the bicycle, and even the material strength of the bicycle itself. So when you want to optimize something, you always look at the lower level things that are happening. So in the long run, in the very long run, if you want to optimize something, definitely data structure and algorithm skills are important.
Hello, sorry. I think I got
Hello?
lagged out
Yeah.
a bit. Yeah, I got lagged out a bit.
Oh,
Sorry. Sorry on that. Yeah, sorry on that.
it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We move on to the next question, which is from Jiang Edwin. Okay, so he asks, other than build and train the ML model, do DS at Shopee still need to build dashboard slash data warehouse slash deployment? Currently, he works as DS in a vendor company, but he needs to do all of those things.
Right. I think data science team at Shopee has grown a lot. Um, of course, like it started with just one person, and then it grew to 10 plus person, and then now it's a much bigger team. And people are more specialized now. But from time to time, we still need to do
is there not a position called NLPE, NLP engineer?
I think that depends a lot on the company. So like I think roles are not that important. You could like go to you could like work at Grammarly. So Grammarly is the Chrome extension that we use to correct our grammar mistakes. They would be very focused on NLP, and they might have a role called data science, but what they do is actually NLP. Yeah, I think you could look at these companies or the companies that are highly researched or invested into NLP. Then what roles they offer actually doesn't matter that much because they're just highly focused on NLP.
All right. So we move on to this next question. Next, we have a question from Jordan Pang.
I think a few cases is like a few cases that you can use hierarchical clustering is when you want to perhaps cluster the different user behaviors. You do not know how many groups of user they are. You just want to use a clustering algorithm and then run the hierarchical clustering, and then you split the users into two main groups, and then further split the user into multiple more refined groups and so on. For random forest, I think a lot of business use it to supervise learning, because I think there are a few advantages to random forest. First of all, it's very robust. It's not likely to overfit to the data, and secondly, it can be run parallelly. So every tree can be trained independently, so it scales pretty quickly with it scales really well with the number of CPU cores you have. So I think the answer would be like so unsupervised learning for hierarchical clustering or unsupervised problems, and then for random forest you use supervised problems. Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Desmond. The next question would be from Alice Q. What kind of internship roles would you suggest for fresh grad in data science field undergraduate students?
You could go for perhaps a research intern role, or you could just go for a data science intern role. Or even data engineer role, or even data analyst role. Learn about how things get started from the very start and then how it got into production. I think yes, I think I think not that much as compared to software engineer roles. That's for sure. That's a given. I think it's just natural for companies to hire software engineers first, and then like once they grow big enough, they would hire data science and data analysts. But I think this is a problem that the ACN is trying to solve as well. Like a lot of business would actually be much better if they have data science and data analysts in their company. So like DSCN is trying to connect the students, DS and DA to these businesses. So I think there's a demand, but a lot of the time stakeholders don't think that they need to hire a DS or DA, or maybe they think it's too expensive to hire. But yeah, that's just my opinion of it.
All right. Thanks. We move on to the next question by Zishan. Any advice for students who are taking non-data science / computer science degrees to venture into data science field? Questions. We have another question from Alice Q. She said that last question from me. Which company would you like to suggest for fresh grad that is willing to join as part of an internship?
Well, I might not have the name, but the companies that I've been through are pretty good. Like Moneyline is pretty good in data science, and I think I would look at a few. They should have a strong fundamental in data science. Actually, what affects the entire internship experience the most is your relationship and how much you can learn from your manager actually. So if you have a really good manager, then who's willing to guide you along, then you learn a lot from the internship experience. The time for the machine learning algorithm to output a result is 10 seconds, then they will ask you, how would you speed it up? And then usually I would answer with try to get more information first. Like what kind of algorithm is this? Is this a CNN network? Is this a deep learning network? Is this a random forest? What device the algorithm is running on? Is it a CPU? Is it on cloud? Is it on-prem? And try to understand the problem first. Always take your time to understand the problem, and then during this time, the interviewer also knows, like, oh, you're just not trying to give an answer. You are trying to understand the problem deeply before you try to give a solution to it. I think these are the things that they test you on, like how would you approach a problem is a very important thing that DS interviews. Some questions as well. Think of it as a conversation, a technical discussion, like you are both into this problem and want to solve it. Yeah.
All right. Actually, this is only part of her question. The second part of the question is right here.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from preparing a portfolio, what other things or knowledge should be prepared before a data science interview?
I think if you are into machine learning roles, you should at least know how
Software engineering skills and data science skills together, as
mm,
I would like to explore more DS/ML/DL field with my software engineering background.
definitely. This is for sure. So actually, a lot of data science roles they can be very engineering as well. Like the one I shared before is a machine learning engineer. So depends on the company. Some companies or like AI engineers. Some companies for these roles they don't require the machine learning engineer or AI engineer to train models. Some companies they require, but I think the common thing that they require is that you need to productionize the model. So if you are good with software engineering, especially backend API designs and how to write an efficient backend and how to make sure the concurrency, how to ensure that there are no race condition and all that. Um, you should look for roles like MLE or AI engineer, which could leverage your skills into the data science world.
All right, thanks, Desmond. Moving on to the next question from Hao Zemoy. Do data analysts learn how to train AI models, prediction, and clustering algorithm based on the nature of the data sets? And does data analyst job role
To be robust and backed up by statistical tests. So I think for data analysts, they might use very simple neural networks, or for time series features, they might use T-bets or ANOVA to predict the future. Those are like statistical models. You could also call them as AI models, but they might not be. I think they might not be looking into how to use a much bigger, much complex models which require a GPU or a very advanced GPU or multiple GPUs to train on. So they might use a much simpler models, AI models that can be run on CPU or perhaps just one or two CPU cores. I think yes. So the answer is yes. But it might be much simpler models. But it's a very good starting point. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. Moving on to the next question from Kaita. For those who doesn't have a SC degree, is it possible or is it hard for them to land a job in DS field in Singapore or Malaysia?
I think it's possible, but it can be harder because people usually just look at what degree you have. But you can always prove yourself, like without a master degree, PhD degree, like I said before, you can always prove yourself with the other alternative experience you have with your portfolios, or you could go on.
Okay. We move on to the next question from Wong Reichen. Is there any good platform or website that provides good training space to learn machine learning through problem solving?
So I would say after we have got the fundamentals right from the Andrew Ng courses, which I recommended, like the machine learning course he had, then we can perhaps go on to Kaggle.com. So Kaggle is sort of a competition that some of the problems are really interesting. Like they are trying to predict if lung cancer is present in the X-ray image of a lung, and so on. I think that's a valid problem that people are trying to solve. And yeah, I think can start from there. There are prizes to be won as well if you could get into the top ranking. Accuracy depends on your accuracy and whatever they are measuring. Kaggle.com is a good resource.
Okay, so for now, we are going to pick a few questions that were
Managerial track or the technical track.
question, which would be, what is the most important skill that one needs to have for these data jobs and for a statistician?
The most important skill, I think, the very technical one, like SQL and Python, and then perhaps having a strong business and product sense is important as well, because you always want to be solving high value business problems.
All right. Moving on to the next question, it would be, does the pandemic of COVID-19 accelerate the demand of data analysts and data scientists, and why? Why is that so?
Um, I'm not too sure about this, but so far I think I haven't seen a very proven increase. And not people are talking about the relationship between COVID-19 as well as demand of data analysts and data scientists as well. But I do see a pattern um, where people are more open to remote working. So I'll say it's a good thing for Malaysia as well because data science and analysts may not require to work from office all the time and they can work from home. So it's a good opportunity to apply for perhaps overseas or um, well I I think it would definitely help the SMEs, especially the SME tech companies because um, having feedback from the data, you could run multiple experiments and A/B testing to validate that what you have done is useful or not. So it helps the company to have as much control in your code as possible. Then you can inject code into your current code, like in the backend to track user behavior. And yeah, then you could go on to analyze the data.
Okay, I see. So just now I said that that was the last question, but it turns out that we have a
Mhm.
viewer that submitted one last question. So we'll take this the very last question. And I would say that the Q&A section is closed with this question. And it's a question from DVR. What are the few things you wish you knew before landing a job in Shopee?
So when I joined, there are actually a few skills that I'm not that good at. Um, so I hope to be perhaps prepare more on the technical skills that I lack. For example, like Kubernetes and Docker. I think these two skills are the skills that I always wanted to learn. Like even before.
All right, I see. So that marks the end of the Q&A section and also almost the end of the webinar. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of DACM Malaysia to thank Mr. Desmond Yeo once again for spending your time and sharing your wonderful insights and knowledge with all of us on how to on like your experience, your personal experience, so that we don't have to treat the hard way again. So we just like take advices from you and build on ourselves. And when someone as experienced as Desmond is trying to share his insights with all of you, I would say
Not
that
that
this is like a
experience.
very yeah, but I would say that this is a very one of a kind webinar, because like not many people would tell you personally on so many things that what you should or shouldn't do, or like what is the path, or what is your angle, things like that. So it's a very useful session, like personally, because I'm also interested in building a career path in data science. So once again, I would like to thank Desmond, and that marks the end of today's webinar. Thank you, viewers, for attending. uh, Again, please fill out the feedback form so that we can improvise your experience, and we can make it better for the upcoming events. And with this, goodbye everyone, and once again, thanks Desmond, and goodbye.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.